Well, first of all, in 2 Timothy 2:2, Paul tells Timothy this. He says, the things that you've heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust these to faithful men. Actually, the word is faithful persons, who will be able to teach others also. But one thing to understand is that Paul was a teacher. He was a pastor. Pastors. Okay? And Timothy was a young pastor. So Paul was saying, everything that I teach you, I want you to teach other men so that they can teach other men, if they can teach other men. So there would be pastors all around the world who would teach the same lesson. So we would all see the same thing. Okay, so the example there is that every one of us should work in the process of making disciples, but every one of us might not be a teacher. Okay, some of us are not good at teaching. Okay, so maybe you're not a teacher, but maybe you're a good servant, or maybe you're a very kind person, or maybe you are very wise, and you can share that with another young lady, and that is you discipling them, and they're learning the things that you know. And so Paul is saying, the things that you've heard from me, teach the other faithful men. And Paul says the things that you heard. So when you hear the word hear, what do you think about it? Listening, right? That's not what Paul meant. Because when we hear the word hear, we think, oh, then I must teach so they can hear. But in the Bible, when the word hear is used, it means understand. Some people may hear, but not really hear. They may hear you with this ear, but not hear you with this ear. They may not understand what you mean. And Jesus said it all the time. He said, hearing, they haven't heard. Having heard, they still didn't hear. So sometimes people would hear Jesus, but they really didn't hear Jesus. So if I was to tell you that Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sin, and he bled on the cross, he took all of our sin and all the lies and all the bad things that we do, and he nailed him to the cross, and he died for that. And then he died and he resurrected from the grave and lived again. Some of you would say, yes, I heard what he said. Oh yeah, many people say, oh yes, I heard him. He said Jesus died on the cross and he resurrected. But some people didn't hear, and they didn't hear. Because if they really heard, they would say, oh, Jesus died for my sin, and I can have life in Christ because of what he did on the cross. So Paul was saying, the things that you have heard from me. So it was about their relationship. Timothy and Paul, they were very close. They hung out all the time. If they were around today, they would probably play basketball together. They would probably read books together. They might ride bikes together. They might hang out all the time. And the reason why they were together so much is because Paul wanted Timothy to understand all the spiritual truth that he had learned from being a disciple of Jesus Christ. So the relationship they had was very important. In 2 Timothy 3, verse 10, I'm going to read it. This is what Paul says to Timothy. He says, now you follow my teaching, conduct, purpose, faith, patience, love, and perseverance. I dropped the paper. Persecutions and sufferings. So Timothy saw Paul in all these situations. He saw Paul's anger, Paul's conduct, Paul's teachings, Paul's behavior. He saw when Paul was persecuted, was beat. They used to beat on Christians for their faith. He saw all of that. And so when we are to make disciples of other people, we live our lives wide open. We let them see what our life looks like so they can understand what it really looks like to live for Jesus Christ. So, Trip, this young man right here, I've known him since he was 16 years old. He's 19 years old now. I've known him since he was 16, and we hung out. We did a lot of things together, so he could see what my life looked like. He could see the gifts that God has given me for Jesus Christ. Now, there are some gifts that I do not have, so that I could not teach him. So he hangs around other men who can show him those gifts. There are some gifts that he has that I don't have, so I can learn from him as well. And we spend time with one another, like Paul and Timothy spent time with one another. And Timothy grew and learned what it looked like to be a disciple of Jesus Christ because he watched Paul's life. So it's a life-on-life relationship. You spend life on life with the person. It says that he knew his doctrine. Timothy knew the teachings of Paul. He knew the stuff that Paul taught. It says he knew Paul's manner of life. He knew Paul's lifestyle. I have another guy, a young guy who is 21 years old. And we would go to downtown Dallas in Texas. You heard of Texas? Anybody? Yeah. Right on. Texas in the USA. We would go downtown. Lots of buildings. Lots of dance clubs. You know dance clubs? Don't do those. Lots of dance clubs. Lots of people who are getting drunk and doing violent crimes and acts. And we would go downtown. We would stand outside and we would share, we would share the gospel of Jesus Christ with these people. And one night, I saw a man, and he's a very big man, bigger than me. And he had, tattoo markings on his face, and his hair was bald, and I told him about the gospel of Jesus Christ. And he looked at me. And he looked at me and he said to me, I don't want to hear your gospel. I already know I'm going to hell. And he spit in my face. Now, what do you think I did? What do you think I wanted to do? I wanted to do some very mean things to this man. But I had a young man with me who wanted to be discipled and learn what it looks like to be like Jesus Christ. So he was watching me. So I did nothing. Sat there and I prayed silently for that man. Well, about 2 years later, I went to a church in Louisiana. From Louisiana? New Orleans? Okay. And at this church, a young man came up to me and said, hey, I know you. I said, you know me? He said, yes, I know you. He said, I was drunk downtown in Dallas, and you were talking about Jesus Christ. And a man spit in your face. And I watched that, and I said, man, how is it that you could just take that? And I went home, and I questioned, what do I believe in? Do I believe in God enough that I could take that? And he said, and I realized I didn't, and I gave my life to Jesus Christ. Wow. So he's now a Christian. And so you see, I had a young man who was there with me who looked at my life, who was able to watch my life. Get women in your lives when you're in church, and if there's older women, older girls that you can look at and model the good things about Jesus Christ. There may be some women who read their Bible quite often, whose life you say, man, I want to be like her, but I can't. Well, hang around her. Spend more time with her. There may be young girls who would like to be like you. And maybe they're watching everything you do. So maybe you should be careful about some of the things that you do. Because you're always going to make a disciple, no matter what. Everyone's making disciples. There's always somebody looking at you, following you, and doing the things that you do. And so Paul wanted Timothy to watch his life because Paul was living his life for Jesus Christ. He said, Timothy, watch my life. You know my life. And I'm not going to be here very long. 2 Timothy is Paul's last letter. He writes no more letters because he will die.